Queer News and Journalism is a Gay 45 original podcast published every week on Thursdays, where we come together to comment on the topics in the weekly queer news published by our newsletter, The Nine. Subscribe on gay45.com to get the latest news every week.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the latest digest from Gay 45, and it's a week that just shows you the sheer global volatility of queer life right now.
It really does.
We have everything from, immediate life and death crises in refugee camps to these decades-long legal battles, and then
the sheep.
And then, just when you think you have a handle on things,
Yeah.
a bizarre corporate fashion line involving sheep.
It's such a fantastic spread of information, and our mission today is to give you a shortcut to being well-informed on all these different fronts.
Yeah.
The news really highlights this tension we see everywhere. That immediate need for local community support like housing and shelters running right up against these slow, difficult, large-scale policy fights over things like media neutrality or decriminalization. We'll be connecting dots between Mexico, Kenya, Germany, and Malawi. It's a lot to cover.
It is.
But before we get into the really heavy issues, we have to talk about the headline that just stopped me in my tracks. Grindr, the app, is now in the fashion business. They've launched a line made from the wool of same-sex preferring rams.
It's certainly a creative approach to charity, let's put it that way.
Okay, let's unpack this later. We'll save the I Will Survive collection, but first, let's focus on the essential work happening on the groundwork that provides actual safety. So, we'll start with Section 1, looking at global efforts for safety and shelter, and it really shows these contrasting realities across the world. Starting on a really positive note, the Gay 45 Digest reported some excellent news from Tijuana, Mexico.
Yes.
They've opened a new facility specifically for LGBTQ plus migrants, women, and children.
And this is a major structural addition. It's run by Ayuda Acción Mexico, and it's placed, strategically right at this huge migratory crossing point.
So it's where it's needed most.
Exactly. It's designed to support, as they say, the most vulnerable members of the population, and that absolutely includes people who have recently been deported from the U.S.
And it's comprehensive, which is so crucial. It's not just
Not just a temporary stop. No. The services include accommodation for up to 3 months, job placement, basic health care, and this is critical legal assistance.
Right. And the director, Tanya Rodriguez Zafra, is already aiming to expand capacity from 30 to 50 soon.
Yeah, making this the third center of its kind in Mexico. It shows this consistent, thoughtful community infrastructure building.
It does, and it's this proactive creation of infrastructure for safety that makes the next piece of news just so jarring. We have to pivot to the dire crisis that's unfolding in the Kakuma camp in Kenya.
It's a tough pivot. Resource collapse is leading to mass displacement there.
That report was chilling. I mean, you're seeing LGBTQ plus refugees forced to flee Kakuma camp because food rations have been cut.
And not just cut. They're described as the lowest on record.
The lowest on record. And this is a direct consequence of a massive collapse in donor funding following shifts in foreign assistance policies, including, those under the previous U.S. administration.
And what's fascinating here, but also deeply disturbing, is seeing how quickly these global geopolitical shifts, like donor funding cuts, influenced by politics, thousands of miles away, immediately translate into severe, life-threatening crises for the most vulnerable.
The impact is just overwhelming. Shelters in Nairobi. Advocacy groups like Queers of Kakuma have helped to relocate around 200 refugees just between June and October.
But the capital's safe houses are just buckling under the pressure.
The numbers are stark. One house built for 40 is currently hosting 96 people.
96. And people are sleeping 3 to a mattress.
I can't even imagine.
And aid workers are, they're rightly warning that this density, plus the resource cuts, it means immediate risks of water and sanitation shortages, disease outbreaks. It's a catastrophic emergency.
Where local solutions just can't keep pace.
They can't, not with this scale of resource failure.
It's almost unbearable to hold the scale of that crisis alongside this next bit of news from Vienna, Austria. But maybe this new shared home for queer senior citizens represents the long-term structural safety that we hope everyone fleeing Kakuma one day achieves.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful milestone, marking the opening of Austria's first shared home specifically for queer seniors aged 60 and up.
So what does that look like?
It's a large, barrier-free 6-person unit. It was developed by Volkshochschule.
And the Gay 45 Digest mentioned this was first proposed back in the 90s. So what kind of barriers did they have to overcome to finally make this happen?
I'm sure they were significant. But the key here is secured visibility. It fulfills that aim to make queer aging safe and visible throughout a person's lifetime.
So people don't have to go back into the closet.
Exactly. It creates a communal area where elders don't have to fear that or fear dealing with heteronormative environments late in life. It's about respecting queer history through housing.
Okay, shifting gears now from community infrastructure to the fight for legal protection. This is Section 2, Policy Battles and Activism Tributes. And we really need to look closely at Malawi, which is currently facing its UN Human Rights Council review.
And this is a huge pressure point for human rights groups.
Yeah.
They are intensely, and I mean intensely, calling for the repeal of colonial-era laws.
These are the laws that criminalize same-sex relations, right? Punishable by up to 14 years in prison.
That's right. And the history there is so fraught. We all remember the high-profile 2009 prosecution of Tijuana Chimbalonga and Stephen Manjeza.
Of course, and even though there was a moratorium introduced in 2012, it was later lifted.
Right. And the courts have resisted challenges to these laws even in the past year.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what does that tell us?
Well, it shows that what is happening is not just legal inertia. This adherence to colonial-era law shows how political will, or the lack of it, turns a strong regional trend toward decriminalization into a specific, isolated political choice for Malawi.
And that context is so key because neighboring countries, Angola, Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, they've all moved toward decriminalization recently.
Exactly. Malawi is rapidly becoming a significant regional outlier, and this UN review just heightens that scrutiny.
Moving to Europe, we have to pause and reflect on a real loss. Robert Ukusik, a prominent Polish LGBTQ plus pioneer and activist, passed away at 55.
His legacy is just massive, particularly for Eastern Europe. He was doing pioneering work back in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, especially in advocacy for people living with HIV and just tirelessly challenging stigma.
It's moments like these you realize the cost of this fight. I mean, that generation laid the groundwork that allows us to even talk about things like marriage equality today.
Absolutely.
And what really distinguished Ukusik was his ability to combine that high-level advocacy with hands-on support running queer-friendly venues, focusing on harm reduction. His passing leaves a foundational gap in Eastern European activism.
It really does. Meanwhile, in Germany, we find a story where current activism is fighting to protect workers from a proposed new policy.
Right. A Berlin network supporting trans-sex workers, Transsex Works, is marking its 10th anniversary.
Which should be a celebration.
Should be. But they're facing renewed fears over a proposed ban known as the Nordic model.
Okay, can you just quickly define that model for us?
Sure. The Nordic model, which was popularized in Sweden, is a legislative approach that criminalizes the purchase of sex. The idea is to target demand.
But not the selling of it.
Correct. The selling of sex is left legal, and this proposal is being pushed by the CDU-CSU Germany's major center-right political alliance.
And activists, including Transsex Works, are lobbying hard against this. Why are they so concerned about a model that is, ostensibly aimed at stopping exploitation?
Because this is a consistent argument globally from activists. They argue that such laws don't actually stop sex work.
They just push it underground.
Exactly. It drives the industry underground, which increases the risk of violence, exploitation, and disease for already vulnerable workers. For Transsex Works, which has spent a decade providing support, this policy is seen as a direct threat to their entire safety infrastructure.
And finally, a really great nod to historical courage in the UK. Durham has unveiled a plaque honoring Sam Green, recognized as Britain's first openly gay elected politician.
Green won a city council seat in 1972. I mean, just think about that for a second.
It's incredible.
This is only 5 years after the partial decriminalization of homosexuality in England and Wales. He campaigned openly about his sexuality, which was a deeply radical and, frankly, dangerous move at the time.
The reports note that this courage exposed him to harassment and physical attacks. It's just a powerful reminder that political change is built on individuals willing to take risks that were previously unthinkable. Our third section takes us into media scrutiny and, finally, that very unexpected corner of corporate culture. So, starting with the media, we have to look at these serious allegations against the BBC in the UK regarding impartiality.
The BBC is facing some intense pressure here about alleged bias in its coverage of transgender issues. This follows a leaked 19-page internal memo from a former editorial standards advisor.
And the memo alleged that a small, active group of LGBT reporters effectively imposed a kind of censorship on what are called gender-critical stories.
Right, so stories that question the medical or social direction of gender affirmation. And the memo claims coverage was skewed toward celebrating the trans experience instead.
So this highlights a massive internal battle over neutrality.
It does. The memo also cited a specific impartiality breach ruling against a newsreader, Martine Croxall.
Oh, right, for changing the term pregnant people to women and appearing to roll her eyes on air during a broadcast.
Hmm.
But wait, if a group of reporters is pushing back on what they see as anti-trans narratives, isn't that just, good editorial activism? Or is the BBC's mandate of absolute neutrality truly sacrosanct here, no matter the topic?
Well, that is the core question this memo raises, isn't it? The BBC's public mandate is impartiality, and while reporter Deborah Cohen rejected claims of systemic bias, the existence of this memo and these specific rulings show that the very definition of neutrality is being heavily contested.
Yeah.
For an organization reporting to such a diverse public, balancing perspectives is non-negotiable, even on topics where feelings run incredibly high.
That is a dope dive into media ethics right there.
Yeah.
Okay. We've been in heavy policy and crisis mode. But the Gay 45 Digest always saves one headline that forces you to just recalibrate your entire understanding of the news cycle.
It's time.
We have to talk about the Grindr fashion line.
We promise you bowl. And here it is. Grindr launched a 36-piece fashion collection called I Will Survive.
I will survive, I can't.
And it leverages the fleece supplied by a German nonprofit, Rainbow Wool. The nonprofit specifically rescues rams that exhibit consistent same-sex mounting behavior.
And the proceeds go to the German queer rights organization LSVD plus BSO, which is great. But I had to read the headline 3 times. Same-sex preferring rams. I need you to walk us through the actual science that the digest included here.
Okay, so the scientific premise is verifiable. Studies, particularly from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, indicate that roughly 6 to 8% of domesticated rams consistently prefer male partners.
So it's a real measurable thing.
It is. Now, the popular, digestible claim that 1 in every 12 sheep is gay remains unverified, but the behavior itself is absolutely measurable.
So the intent was to highlight discrimination faced by both these animals, who are often culled if they aren't useful for breeding and LGBTQ plus communities.
That's the stated intent from the designer, Michael Schmidt. It's a bold, slightly absurd, but definitely memorable intersection of verifiable animal behavior being leveraged for corporate marketing.
And a very worthy charity.
In a very worthy charity, LSVD plus Verity. It certainly got everyone talking, which, arguably is the point.
Speaking of talking points, let's quickly hit our culture deep dive, highlighting recommended media from the Gay 45 Digest that are shaping the cultural conversation right now.
First up, in film, we have Pedro Pino's Only Rest in the Storm. This is being hailed as one of the year's finest queer political dramas.
And it follows a queer activist who's forced into hiding after state repression.
Yeah, and the critique is interesting. It notes that Pino blends realism with this quiet lyricism, charting small, ordinary acts of resistance rather than just focusing on heroic martyrdom.
It sounds incredibly relevant to the policy struggles we were just discussing.
Definitely. For readers, Yael van der Woesten's debut novel, The Safekeep, is described as taut and quietly disquieting. It's set in a Dutch landscape, and it probes these uneasy intimacies.
Turning small gestures and silences into clues about possession and memory. We love a novel that turns domestic order into psychological tension.
Yes, and the Dutch landscape just enhances that feeling of isolation and quiet scrutiny.
It does.
Finally, in music, you could definitely check out Amarai's third album, Black Star. This album is just all about maximal confidence and high swagger.
The lyricism is so lavish, like, my Bentley could fit on my Amex. And you've got high-profile features, really expensive-sounding production. It's borrowing from across the African diaspora.
And it's the sound of a pop star owning the room. Absolutely.
What an incredible scope we've covered today. I mean, from new long-term safety infrastructure in Vienna and Tijuana to the urgent needs of refugees in Kakuma.
To the decades-long legal battles in Malawi, yeah.
And then the completely unexpected intersection of fashion and ovine sexuality via Grindr. It just shows how quickly the landscape is shifting in every sector, for better and for worse.
When you look at the full spectrum of news, from these slow-moving policy battles like the BBC bias allegations or the repeal demands in Malawi, to the immediate establishment of community infrastructure like the shelter in Tijuana, it raises an important question. What specific role can nonprofit, local-level organizing play in providing immediate, sustainable support when national and international political efforts stall or fail?
That's the question.
And the evidence from the Gay 45 Digest suggests that local networks are often the only lifeline available.
A question worth holding on to as you reflect on this week's global news. You can also listen to any of our articles. Visit gay45.com to read more quality journalism.